Nobody walked into Team USA camp expecting a quiet takeover. On paper, this was supposed to be a wide-open competition. Multiple stars. Limited roster spots. A new Olympic cycle just beginning. Every player fighting to prove they belonged. But by the end of the first few practices, the conversation had already shifted, and not because of hype, headlines, or social media buzz. It shifted because Caitlin Clark showed up looking like someone who never left. 4 months, the basketball world had been asking the same question. After injuries piled up, after her sophomore season fell apart, after nearly half a year away from competitive basketball, was she still that player? Or had the league already started moving on? Team USA camp wasn't just another practice run. It was an evaluation under a microscope. Every movement mattered. Every possession was watched. And every mistake would be remembered. What happened instead caught people off guard. Clark didn't just look healthy. She didn't just blend in. She didn't ease her way back. From the moment the ball touched her hands, she controlled the tempo, the spacing, and the energy in the gym. Coaches noticed. Teammates felt it. And suddenly, what was supposed to be a crowded battle for the future started looking one-sided. And while one player quietly locked herself into the center of Team USA's plans, others found themselves facing uncomfortable questions about fit, role, and direction. This wasn't about popularity. It wasn't about stats. It was about who actually moved the game forward when it mattered. By the end of camp, the message was clear, even if nobody said it out loud. The future of Team USA basketball wasn't up for debate anymore. And it all started the moment Caitlin Clark stepped back on the court. For nearly 5 months, Caitlin Clark disappeared from the one place she was never supposed to vanish from, the basketball court. After a rookie season that didn't just impress but completely rewrote record books, her second year was supposed to be a victory lap. Instead, it became a test of patience, doubt, and resilience that few players ever face so early in their careers. The numbers from her rookie year were absurd. 62 records fell. Not slowly. Not quietly. They collapsed one after another as Clark torched defenses, pulled up from distances nobody was supposed to shoot from, and turned ordinary possessions into moments people replayed for weeks. Triple-doubles. Logo threes. Game-breaking passes. She didn't just arrive in the league, she flipped it upside down. And then everything stopped. One injury turned into another. A stretch of recovery became a cycle of setbacks. Just as she would feel close to returning, something else would flare up. The rhythm that once came naturally disappeared. The confidence that comes from playing every night was replaced by rehab rooms, training schedules, and watching games instead of controlling them. By the end of the season, she had played only 13 games. 13. For a player who had just changed the sport, that number felt unreal. The silence around her grew louder by the week. No highlight clips. No viral shots. No debates about how far she could shoot from next. The league kept moving. New stars emerged. New narratives formed. And slowly, the whispers started creeping in. Could her body actually hold up? Would the injuries keep coming? Was that historic rookie season something we'd never fully see again? Clark felt it too. She admitted later how isolating the process became. Being hurt isn't just physical. It disconnects you from the game itself. You lose timing. You lose rhythm. You lose the daily proof that you're still elite. For someone whose identity had been built around competing at the highest level, that absence weighed heavy. By the time Team USA camp approached, she hadn't played competitive basketball in nearly 5 months. No tune-up games. No gradual return under the radar. Her first real test back would be under the brightest possible spotlight. This wasn't a pre-season scrimmage. This wasn't a charity run. This was an audition for the 2026 World Cup and the 2028 Olympics, with every coach, analyst, and decision-maker watching closely. And unlike other camps, there was nowhere to hide. Every sprint would be evaluated. Every change of direction would be noticed. Every sign of hesitation would raise questions. Team USA wasn't looking for potential. They were looking for reliability. Players who could be trusted when gold medals were on the line. Clark knew that walking into camp healthy wasn't enough. She had to prove she was the same player. Or better. The pressure was real, and she didn't deny it. Walking into the gym that first day, nerves were there. Not fear, but awareness. Awareness of what this moment meant. Awareness of how quickly narratives change in elite basketball. Awareness that this was her chance to take control of the story again. And then she picked up the ball. That's when the noise faded. That's when the questions paused. Because whatever doubts existed outside that gym didn't survive what happened next. The first few touches told the story. Not slowly. Not over time. Instantly. Clark didn't look like someone easing her way back after months away. There was no stiffness. No hesitation. No extra seconds spent thinking about movement. The ball flowed through her hands the same way it always had, and with each possession, the pace of the gym began to shift around her. She admitted later that the nerves were there right up until warm-ups. But the moment she started dribbling, something clicked. The comfort returned. The instincts took over. Muscle memory erased the months of doubt in seconds. By the time practice officially began, she wasn't thinking about injuries or time away. She was reading defenders, calling out spacing, and pushing the tempo like nothing had ever interrupted her career. What stood out most wasn't even the shooting. It was how fast she moved. The burst was back. That sudden acceleration that had separated her from defenders before injuries ever entered the picture was there again. When she turned the corner on handoffs, defenders were late. When she pushed the ball in transition, the floor opened up. Coaches didn't need data or advanced metrics to see it. They saw it with their eyes. Her conditioning wasn't perfect yet, and nobody expected it to be. Even Clark acknowledged she still needed to get her lungs fully under her. But what mattered more was how clean her movements looked. She stopped on a dime. She changed direction without favoring anything. She rose into shots smoothly. Those are the details coaches watch for when deciding whether a player is truly back or just surviving. And she wasn't surviving. Her shots began to fall in rhythm. Deep ones. Quick release threes. Pull-ups that forced defenders to chase harder than they wanted to. But again, it wasn't about volume. She wasn't hunting numbers. She was hunting advantages. If the defense collapsed, she passed. If they hesitated, she fired. Every decision came quickly, and every decision made sense. Coach Cara Lawson summed it up with a sentence that sounded simple but carried weight. She said Clark looked good on both ends. For a player coming off an injury-plagued season, that wasn't a casual compliment. That was confirmation. Defense requires trust in your body. Lateral movement. Recovery speed. Balance. Clark showed all of it. Sue Bird saw it too. The managing director didn't hide her reaction as practices went on. The excitement wasn't about highlights, it was about control. Clark wasn't forcing herself into the action. The action naturally flowed through her. When she had the ball, everyone else knew where to go. When she didn't, defenders still reacted as if she might. There was one play early in camp that quietly erased any remaining doubts. Clark received a dribble handoff, turned the corner with speed, drew help, and delivered a pass downhill that hit her teammate perfectly in stride. No hesitation. No adjustment. Just instinct. The kind of play you don't make if you're thinking about your body. By day 2, the word rust no longer applied. Analysts stopped asking whether she was back and started discussing how quickly she had taken control. The timing. The pace. The awareness. It all looked sharper than expected for someone who hadn't played in nearly half a year. And that's when the realization started settling in. This wasn't just a healthy return. This was a player reminding everyone exactly who she was. Some connections don't need time to develop. They either exist or they don't. And within minutes of Team USA practice, it became clear that Caitlin Clark already had one that changed everything. Aaliyah Boston didn't need to look for her. She didn't need signals. She didn't need extra communication. The moment Clark secured the ball, Boston was already moving, and the ball was already on its way. The passes arrived exactly where they needed to be, often before defenders realized what was happening. It looked less like a new pairing and more like two players picking up a conversation they never stopped having. That chemistry wasn't accidental. Clark and Boston had spent an entire season together with the Indiana Fever, learning each other's timing, tendencies, and instincts. They understood spacing without talking. They knew when to slow the game down and when to hit the accelerator. That familiarity gave Team USA something most camps struggle to create: immediate trust. The coaches noticed right away. Most guards need weeks to learn how their bigs like the ball. Some never fully figure it out. Clark delivered entry passes at perfect angles, hit Boston in stride on cuts, and found her rolling to the rim through traffic that would freeze other point guards. The margin for error in those moments is razor thin. Clark made it look routine. One sequence stood out. Clark grabbed a defensive rebound and pushed the floor without hesitation. No reset. No pause. Just pure tempo. Defenders scrambled backward, unsure who to pick up. Boston sprinted down the middle of the lane, sealing her defender at the exact right moment. The pass came before the defense could react. Easy finish. Coaches nodded. That single possession explained everything. This is what separates great players from elite ones. Even when Clark's shot wasn't falling, the defense couldn't relax. Her gravity stayed the same. Defenders hugged her beyond the arc, terrified of the moment she might heat up. That pressure cracked the floor open for everyone else. Suddenly, cutters were free. Shooters had space. Bigs were finishing without double teams. Boston benefited the most, but she wasn't the only one. Jackie Young found herself cutting into open lanes, rewarded with passes that hit her in stride. Other players started sprinting the floor harder, knowing Clark would see them. The energy shifted. The gym moved faster. Players trusted that if they made the right read, the ball would find them. That's not something you teach in a playbook. It's feel. It's awareness. It's knowing when to push and when to pull back. Clark controlled the rhythm like a conductor, and everyone around her adjusted to match it. Even players who had never shared the court with her before began to look more comfortable. Team chemistry in national team settings usually takes weeks to build. Sometimes months. Here, it happened almost instantly. Not because of speeches or drills, but because one player naturally made the game easier for everyone else. And while one connection was thriving in front of everyone's eyes, the contrast elsewhere on the floor was becoming harder to ignore. Team USA camp wasn't designed to be comfortable. It wasn't a celebration. It was a pressure cooker. Every player there understood the reality. This wasn't an open invitation. It was a test. Limited spots. Elite expectations. And no guarantees. Everyone talked about competition heading into camp. Multiple stars chasing the same roles. Guards fighting for minutes. Forwards trying to separate themselves. The narrative was simple. Nothing would come easy, and nobody's place was safe. That's what made what happened next so striking. While others focused on proving themselves possession by possession, Clark approached camp from a completely different angle. She wasn't forcing shots to stand out. She wasn't trying to dominate the ball. Instead, she made every possession cleaner, every set smoother, every decision faster. And that quiet efficiency began separating her from the rest of the group. Analysts watching practice described her as on fire, but not in the way people usually mean. It wasn't just about hitting shots, though she did plenty of that. It was about decision-making under pressure. She drained deep threes with defenders closing hard. She split traps with quick passes. She read help defense before it arrived. Every choice felt correct. The difference became obvious when the pace picked up. In a camp filled with elite athletes, Clark consistently stayed one step ahead. She knew when to attack early and when to pull the defense out. She recognized mismatches instantly. And when teammates made good cuts or set solid screens, she rewarded them immediately. Other players were playing for themselves. Clark was playing for the team. That matters more than people realize in national team settings. Coaches aren't just selecting talent, they're selecting trust. They need players who can execute without overthinking, who don't need plays called for them to impact the game. Clark fit that mold perfectly. The competition everyone expected still existed, just not where they thought. Guards were still fighting for roster spots. Wings were still battling for minutes. But the primary point guard role? That fight didn't last long. Clark's control of the offense made it feel settled before it was ever officially discussed. You could see it in how teammates responded. Players started looking for her in key moments. They followed her tempo changes. They adjusted spacing based on where she wanted the floor to open up. That level of buy-in doesn't happen unless someone has already earned it. And as Clark continued to elevate everyone around her, the pressure quietly shifted elsewhere. Because when one player makes the game easier, it forces uncomfortable questions about who fits, and who doesn't, in the direction the team is heading. Every elite team eventually runs into the same issue. Talent alone isn't enough. Fit matters. Role clarity matters. And when the direction of a team becomes clear, not everyone's game translates the way they expect it to. Angel Reese arrived at camp knowing exactly how much making Team USA meant. She said it openly. Everyone there wanted a spot. Everyone understood the honor. And to her credit, her strengths were never in question. Rebounding, physicality, energy, tenacity. Those traits can win games at the highest level. But Team USA wasn't just evaluating effort. They were evaluating identity. The system unfolding in front of everyone was fast, spacing-driven, and guard-oriented. Tempo mattered. Decision-making mattered. Players who could thrive without needing the ball became increasingly valuable. And that's where the tension began to show. Reese's game has always leaned toward volume and presence. She thrives when she's heavily involved, when she can impose herself physically and emotionally on the floor. But in this environment, opportunities shrank quickly. With Clark controlling tempo and creating advantages, possessions became sharper and more structured. There was less room for freelancing, less tolerance for hesitation. The contrast was subtle, but it was there. Clark elevated others by simplifying their reads. Reese struggled to find that same rhythm within the flow. While Clark's style opened space, Reese's touches often came in crowded areas where decisions had to be instant. In a system built on pace and spacing, every half-second mattered. Coaches didn't criticize Reese publicly. They didn't need to. Their focus drifted naturally toward what was working. Clark's connections with Aaliyah Boston and others looked seamless. The ball moved faster. The floor stayed balanced. Defensive rotations improved because offensive possessions ended cleanly. Meanwhile, Reese's role became harder to define. She could rebound. She could defend. But the question wasn't whether she could contribute. It was how much she could contribute without disrupting the rhythm that was already forming. That's a difficult adjustment for any player, especially one used to being a focal point. National teams don't run on individual dominance. They run on cohesion. Players are asked to sacrifice touches, redefine impact, and accept roles that may not match how they're used elsewhere. As practices continued, the difference in fit became clearer. Clark didn't need plays called for her to control the game. Reese needed the game to slow down to maximize her influence. Team USA was speeding up. And in an environment where every decision shapes the future, that mismatch didn't go unnoticed. Sometimes the clearest decisions aren't made with words. They're made with reactions, glances, small moments that most people miss unless they're paying close attention. And inside Team USA camp, the body language started telling a story long before any roster decisions were finalized. Every time Caitlin Clark made the right read, coaches nodded. Not exaggerated reactions. Not celebration. Just recognition. The kind that comes when a staff sees exactly what they're looking for. When she pushed the tempo at the right moment, nobody stopped her. When she pulled the ball out and reset the offense, nobody questioned it. That freedom doesn't happen unless trust is already in place. Sue Bird's reactions stood out the most. As managing director, her role isn't about getting excited over highlights. It's about evaluating sustainability. Can this player control games against the best in the world? Can she be trusted when pressure spikes? Clark answered those questions without saying a word. Bird openly praised how Clark looked moving on the floor. The speed. The burst. The control. Coming off a season where injuries never seemed to stop stacking, that observation mattered more than any stat line. It confirmed that Clark wasn't just healthy, she was confident in her body again. Coach Cara Lawson echoed the same sentiment. Saying Clark looked good on both ends might sound simple, but within a national team environment, it carries weight. Defense exposes hesitation. It forces lateral movement, recovery speed, and balance. Clark showed all of it. She communicated. She rotated. She stayed engaged. Nothing about her movement suggested doubt. As practices continued, players began responding to her presence differently. Teammates naturally spaced the floor wider when Clark had the ball. They cut harder. They ran lanes faster. They trusted that if they did their job, she would do hers. That's leadership without speeches. Meanwhile, the contrast elsewhere became more visible. Some players pressed. Some tried to force moments. Others looked unsure when touches didn't come. Coaches noticed who stayed steady and who reacted emotionally to the shifting hierarchy. Clark stayed the same. She talked constantly on the floor, called out screens, directed traffic, adjusted tempo based on matchups. Younger players gravitated toward her energy. Veterans respected her decision-making. She didn't act like someone fighting for a spot. She acted like someone anchoring the group. By the end of camp sessions, the dynamic had shifted completely. The starting point guard conversation didn't need to happen out loud. It had already happened in real time, possession by possession. And when body language aligns across an entire coaching staff, the decision is usually already made. By the time practices wound down, it became clear this camp was about far more than filling out a roster. What unfolded inside that gym felt like a quiet handoff, the kind that doesn't come with a ceremony, but changes everything moving forward. Team USA was standing at the start of a new Olympic cycle. The past decade had been defined by legends, consistency, and dominance. But cycles don't reset overnight. They transition. And this camp marked the moment when that transition stopped being theoretical and started becoming real. Caitlin Clark stood at the center of it. Not because she demanded attention. Not because she chased validation. But because every decision she made reflected the future direction of the program. Fast. Smart. Unselfish. Adaptable. She didn't try to replicate what came before her. She brought something different. And it worked. Her journey made the moment even heavier. Just months earlier, she was fighting through injuries, watching games instead of controlling them. There were real questions about how her body would respond, how her confidence would hold up, how long it would take her to regain rhythm. Team USA Camp answered all of that in one stretch of practices. She wasn't just back. She was ready to lead. Sue Bird acknowledged how difficult Clark's injury stretch had been, praising how she stayed engaged and connected even while sidelined. That detail mattered. It showed maturity. It showed investment beyond personal stats. And it explained why the coaching staff trusted her so quickly once she returned. Clark herself reflected on the weight of the moment. She talked about representing USA basketball as a dream that started years earlier, back when she wore the jersey at youth levels. Now, that dream carried responsibility. The 2026 World Cup. The 2028 Olympics in Los Angeles. Expectations weren't just high, they were unavoidable. Yet nothing about her play suggested hesitation. She moved freely. She attacked confidently. She adjusted without ego. The qualities that made her a record-breaking rookie had evolved into something more complete. Something sustainable. Something built for international basketball. This wasn't just about one camp or one tournament. It was about identity. Team USA wasn't searching for its next leader anymore. They had found her, not through declarations, but through performance. And once that realization settled in, the rest of the picture started to sharpen. When the dust settled, this camp wasn't remembered for box scores or highlight clips. It was remembered for clarity. The kind that only appears when pressure strips everything else away. Caitlin Clark didn't win a job because of hype. She didn't rely on reputation. She earned it by controlling the game in ways that matter most at the highest level. Tempo, decision-making, trust, fit. She showed that even after months away, even after injuries that derailed an entire season, her understanding of the game hadn't faded. If anything, it sharpened. This was never truly about Clark versus anyone else. It was about direction. Team USA made it clear, without ever announcing it, what kind of basketball they're building toward. Fast. Connected. Unselfish. A system where the ball moves quicker than defenses can react, and where leadership shows up in reads, not speeches. For some players, that system amplifies their strengths. For others, it exposes uncomfortable questions about role and adaptability. That's not a knock. It's the reality of elite basketball. Not every talented player fits every vision. And not every vision waits for players to catch up. Clark didn't need the offense built around her to dominate. She was the structure. That's why teammates played freer. That's why coaches trusted her instantly. And that's why the future of Team USA basketball quietly aligned around her presence. This camp marked the end of speculation and the beginning of something more concrete. The next era isn't coming anymore. It's already here. And now the only real question left is how dominant that era is about to become. If you made it this far, you're clearly locked in on where the game is heading. This channel breaks down moments like this in detail. Not just what happened, but why it matters. If you want more deep dives, smart breakdowns, and real conversations about the future of basketball, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss what's next. Hit like if this video gave you a new perspective, and drop a comment below with your take. Did this camp change how you see Team USA's future? Who fits, and who doesn't?